If you struggle with shyness or social anxiety, check out our free No BS training course with actual useful advice you can do from home. None of that just get out there nonsense. The link is in the description below. For now, let's get to today's question.
The question, can narcissists have social anxiety? Let me provide a few examples so you can see the overlap in action. They elucidate how people with avoidant personality disorder function on a spectrum of emotional and social intelligence. Full guide, From Lonely to Social Life in 27 Days. The previous patient, the high-earning executive named Paul, was also family man and a dedicated father. He coached a number of children's sports teams. People liked him, and as I explained, no one would have pegged him for an avoidant type who ever experienced social anxiety. Paul got things done and was rewarded for it. Paul was well-liked and outgoing. His suffering was silent and usual except in those times when his avoidance negatively impacted others undetected. Jason, the special ed assistant, also showed this trait. In the classroom, for example, his students were out of control, getting out of their seats, fighting. He was unsure what to do, but too embarrassed to ask another teacher for help. Instead of trying anything, he did nothing. In fact, he lamely told the class it was reading time and spent the rest of the class period with his own nose in a book, oblivious to the chaos and robbing them. Students of learning time. What is the thought process that grants avoidant people the right to behavior that others would call rude, inconsiderate, or irresponsible? What mechanisms are at play? I have engaged in this question with several of my patients in hopes of understanding how this behavior can be so pervasive despite its causing both internal consequences, obsessive worry, self-loathing, guilt, and external ones, jobs, clients, friends, and opportunities for themselves and their families. At what point is the decision made to ignore something and then detach from it in such a way that avoidance is tolerable? What follows is a rare interview with Kim, who has lived with avoidant personality since childhood. Kim is dynamic, outgoing, and successful, and yet she suffers from social anxiety that leads to avoidant behavior, placing personal and professional relationships at risk. It was after a conversation in which I suggested that narcissism rather than avoidance was leading her to miss deadlines and avoid phone calls that she eagerly agreed to discuss her experience. "I never thought of it that way," she said. The authentic nature of her narrative should add dimension to the understanding of this elusive pathology. "There's a magic trick I do. I disappear. I can be right there with you all in making big social plans, embarking on fascinating work projects, dazzling, devoted. And then I'm gone." Sometimes, though less often than you'd think, they address the issue. One colleague said, "As soon as you turned in your first draft, which was late, I felt like you disappeared. You didn't check in once to see if I had all I needed." Another told me, "I don't want to have to manage you, which he shouldn't have to do, but I was making so little progress between our meetings that I seemed to barely be moving. It's amazing I could take this criticism without tears, but I always have. I take my lumps. I feel like either failed, which I have, but am not surprised. As I float along in my avoidance neverland, this murky masochistic undercurrent lurks. I can identify at least two benefits I gain through this masochism. For one thing, I get to be right about myself and make others wrong. Inwardly, part of me believes I'm not good enough, despite decades of evidence to the contrary. I have friends who love and trust me, I make a living in my chosen field, etc. Shirking my obligations gives me proof that I'm not good enough again and again. I make others wrong by demonstrating that their confidence in me was misplaced. The second thing is that I get to dominate others and avoid being dominated. Feels a little bit like a little kid with crossed arms yelling, "You're not the boss of me." I'm excellent in my field. I'm not always, which equates to never, reliable. My net value? Zero. It's not just missing work deadlines. My social life suffers too. Find more answers and a free audiobook on how to talk to anyone in the description below. No useless advice like just get out there. I mean actual useful advice from people who have really dealt with shyness and social anxiety and overcome it in their own lives.